with all the stakeholders. It's an interactive, so let's try and get as many questions answered as possible. Honorable Kgakgaoui.
Thank you, Chairperson. Ke a leboha. Ditumediso di entse earlier. Vice Chancellor, how long have you been the Vice Chancellor at your institution? Please switch on your...
Thank you very much for your question, Honorable Member. I started in 2023, January.
Okay, when were the charges that have been laid against students that are appearing in court tomorrow, when were they laid?
This is from last year, from what I gather.
So you were already Vice
22.
Chancellor at the time?
Yes, yes.
Okay, why are the students charged?
It was part of a protest incident where the students instigated basically some violent participation, not at a level where really it was destructive, but it was getting to a point where there needed to be some crowd control, and so they were taken away.
Okay, so it wasn't to the level of violent to criminality, but the problem was that crowd control was an issue. Did I hear you properly?
That was part of it.
Okay,
but the
so-
main thing was controlling the crowds.
Okay, who laid the charges?
The institution had a court interdict.
So the institution had a court interdict against students for having a demonstration.
Honorable Member, when you put it, it's just a it wasn't just a demonstration. It was a protest, and as you know,
Excuse my
nowadays
English,
it's
there's
usually
synonyms in my political head, excuse.
no, don't.
Yeah.
It's the way the escalation tends to happen, where then when you want to avoid it, it gets to a point where there's damage of property or some safety issues for other students and staff members and other members of the community. That's why then crowd control is usually necessary.
Okay, excuse my ignorance. I'm gonna really ask dumb questions because I wasn't there. So you had an interdict in the middle of the protest or before the protest?
That would be in the middle of the protest.
Okay, so the reason why I asked you the first question I asked you around the nature of the protest was I was trying to understand at what point was there justification for an interdict that then resulted in the arresting of students. So I need you to make it sense to myself and everybody else that's listening who's probably confused. So if in your own description, if the demonstrations by students, the protests, were not violent in their nature in your own explanation, but the core issue was crowd control, what then was management's justification for an interdict, for the application of an interdict? Was it you were foreseeing that there might be a problem, that things can get out of hand, or what happened?
Okay. It was foreseeing that things were going to get out of hand, especially when there was throwing of objects around.
Okay. So the students who are now appearing in court, did they destroy or destruct any property on campus?
Well, not that I know of, where it's clear that it's them that destroyed it, but the safety considerations were paramount in that instance.
Okay. So as the Vice Chancellor of the institution, in your own understanding and assessment, why are the students appearing in court?
Honorable Member, it has to do with the period when the students were protesting. There were a number of national protests that were happening around NSFAS and accommodation issues.
Now, 40 minutes
Yes.
sounds like it's a lot. It's not. So
Okay.
I need you to be direct. You've already given context. I don't need you to give me a history lesson of South Africa. Specifically to your institution with the students who are currently going to court tomorrow. What's the issue there? What, in your assessment, if you're asked now as the Vice Chancellor, the executive head of the institution, students are going to court, they were arrested because of your interdict, why?
Well, because they stopped basically progress of the academic agenda.
Okay.
By the protests that could have been dealt with by other means in terms of engagement.
I hear you. President, UFS. Yourself, you are President UFS. No, not UFS, Bloemfontein. I'm so sorry, President Bloemfontein. Is the narration of the Vice Chancellor true to your recollection of the arrests?
Leadership, there's actually two interdicts.
Okay.
There's one from last year where the whole SRC was interdicted. And then the next day there was a protest. That's where 22 students were arrested. And then there's another court interdict now where there's, I can say 6 or 7 respondents, because the last one says any other person that can continue. So for the one where we are appearing in court tomorrow, no one has been arrested. There was a court interdict that was put in place, and then the protest did not continue. And then, yeah, we have a court case tomorrow. So for the one that we are appearing tomorrow, there was no one that was arrested. There was a court interdict that was there, and then the strike did not continue.
So why are you going to court tomorrow?
Leadership, I don't know. I'm the first respondent, maybe because I'm president, but so what happened is I woke up from my rest, right? And then I went to consult the students in terms of what are the grievances and what has caused them to do the protest and barricade gates. Then they indicated that they had sent communication to the dean of students and escalated to everyone regarding their issue, but they feel like they are not being heard, so hence the unrest. So I then did a video on my TikTok to say that there's currently an unrest at the Central University of Technology because services are not being provided. So those are the attachments of my TikTok that they have put on the court interdict. So I guess maybe because of that video, that's why I'm going to court tomorrow. But the interdict further indicates that I was barricading gates and all of that, which is really not true because I had come out of the room after everything had happened. So
Okay.
I think there's just an confusion because there's 2 court interdicts. The first one was there, the protest continued, and then 22.
Let's deal with the first one of 22. What is
Yes.
the status there?
The students are currently going to court, and they've been going to court from last year, around April. I can just get the order so that I can get the dates right. But from last year, first semester, they've been going to court, and the last appearance was now, not the last, but the before now, it was on the 9th of April, and still the court case is just continuing without any proper way forward.
Okay, Vice Chancellor, what is your understand or your definition of destruction of classes?
Disruption of classes, honorable member, is when, we've got a calendar year and a program for the calendar for attendance in classes and so on. So, and there's an understanding that students should attend classes and the university academic agenda should carry on with minimal interruptions. If at all, maybe it's a medical issue and so on, but not when there is unplanned protest on issues that usually, under normal circumstances, actually are already being addressed in other fora.
Okay, so in your understanding, when the students protested, they went into class and they stopped teaching and learning?
Well, that tends to happen as part of it, where they would get students out of class.
Okay, I'm asking about specifically this. I agree the interdict specifically was that there shouldn't be a disruption of academic activity. Is my understanding correct?
Public order, control, disruption of classes.
Okay, so the 6 people that are going to court tomorrow, they themselves went into classes and they told people to not be taught. And they themselves closed gates and they told people not to come to school, and what did they do?
Honorable member, as mentioned, so the 6 people, that's an incident from this year,
Yeah.
where they had been barricading of gates and there were classes that were disrupted, basically did not continue because people didn't have access to the campus. That's one of the pictures that was shown by the president, where I went and talked to students about that, and we spent hours in terms of short-term and immediate term and long-term kind of, achievements that needed to be done to make sure that we carry on with the academic agenda. And a few days later, when actually delivery of some of the services that were expected by a certain date did not happen, so students were not happy about that and went back to barricade gates so that there would be no entrance to campus. And that was something that was seen as really, where is this coming from? We are engaging, there are reasons why the delivery didn't happen at the time it happened. So again, out of concern for the continued kind of disruption of continuous university, continuity of university services and academic agenda, so the court interdict then was applied.
Who has the authority to drop charges in the institution?
Well, the university would have to look at in engagement.
Answer the
with
question, Vesi. Who has the authority to drop charges in the institution?
Well, it depends on the veracity of those. If they need to be taken to council for their
Okay, the
approval,
case we're
yes,
talking
but
about
it would
now.
come through the vice chancellor.
So you yourself have the power to consult council to drop charges?
What, depending on the veracity of the work,
MB,
yes, it
Vice
would be the
Chancellor,
vice.
I don't want us to go kena hanong ka bo ene ko hlompha jwalo ka motswadi wa ka hoba ke monyane ho wena. But I don't want us to have a general conversation when we're having a case-specific conversation. So in this case that we're currently referring to, are you saying you have the power to drop charges?
When it's put as power, yes, it would have
Okay,
to be the
I'm
vice chancellor
asking you
that
now
takes it up.
then, if you yourself have the power?
Consultation.
Yes. So if you have the power to initiate a conversation around the dropping of charges, I'm asking, are you making a commitment to Parliament now here that this is something that you are interested in doing, or that is not something that you don't want to do?
It's something that is not a straightforward black and white, honorable member. It's something that you need to look at what, the context, where we are. And of course, we wouldn't want our students' academic records to be tarnished by, such experiences. So we would want to look at it with that understanding in mind.
Vice Chancellor, the first question I asked you in this engagement was how long you have been Vice Chancellor. So, and you answered honestly. So the response you are giving now around it depends on having an understanding of the challenges of the case and whatnot. That's something that has happened throughout your term. So you have a full understanding of the case. You don't need to go consult anything about what is happening. All I'm trying to get from you here is, because students are crying to say they have a threat of potential criminality attached to their records for life. Mm-hmm. And in my engagement with you now, you said that there was no actual destruction to property and there was no violence. The issue you're referring to was that there was crowd management problem and that there were barricading of gates. Those are the two cases that are a problem, right? But in your own words, you also said, Vice Chancellor, that there was no violence in itself, that the demonstrations or the protest were not escalated to a point of violence altogether. So I'm putting this question to you on the basis of your own responses to say, given everything you've just said right now, I'm asking, are you of the opinion as the executive head of the institution that the charges that students are currently facing should still continue, or are you moved to consider the possibility of dropping the charges? Yes or no?
Well, yes, in terms of making sure that this doesn't happen again, but it wouldn't just end there. It would have to come with an educational and a kind of advocacy around, the consequences of these actions.
When you say advocacy, do you mean somebody must come and advocate to say, we, the students, via the SRC, I assume, commit that we won't disrupt academic proceedings, and if that's a commitment that is made, then we can drop charges?
Well, the commitment, as much as we understand where most of the time the protests come from, but really The commitment towards responsible leadership
Okay.
and student agency.
Responsible leadership, I'm asking this as a politician now, not just as a leader. What are the rules in your understanding that permit public demonstration and protest as per the South African Constitution says is the case? Under which circumstances can in your institution there be a protest?
Well, the freedom to protest, that's in the Constitution, but as we know, Honourable Member, it comes with responsibility as well. So
I'm asking very simple questions. Answer the question, ma'am. Under which circumstances?
And sorry, what was the question then?
My
Under which-
question was very clear. Under which circumstances do you as the Vice Chancellor think it is okay to demonstrate at CUT?
Well, at all times, it's part of the freedom that comes with, the right to be able to protest.
Okay.
But within, within acceptable and agreed upon processes.
Okay.
And most of the time, things happen outside of those agreed processes, so
Okay.
we have to act as they
So you
happen.
first want a notice to say we are going to protest. And in this case, of the current case, you didn't get a notice that people are going to protest. You woke up and the protest was just live.
Yeah, that's the trend.
No,
That we are
I'm
addressing
asking
now.
about this specific case, not the
Yes.
trend, the culture, the specific case on the table.
That's how it
Chairperson, the
is.
reason why I'm asking the questions I'm asking is because ntho e nqakang ke hore, if you are pro a culture of protesting, and in your own admission, the protests that took place on campus were not violent altogether, I am unable to understand why you are unable to then make the same admission that the interdict that you made, which has now adverse consequences of arrests of students and them having to go to court. I mean, having to appear to court to me is the same as an arrest altogether. That to me means hore there isn't really a case for you to be taking these people to court. That is my own observation. But I'm going to leave it there because your answer to me, an inability to be clear on a yes, is a no. So I am hearing you right now in my question of whether you are willing to drop the charges as a no. And I'll take it as that and leave it there. The second question, Chairperson, IR, Institutional Forum, yes. IF, sorry, Institutional Forum Chairperson. You spoke about a list of names that has had omissions to it. Did you get to the bottom of the truth on why the omissions were there?
Sorry, can you just repeat the question?
So we had a conversation earlier. You were presenting earlier that there were lists that were approved by Senate that had to be, and you indicated that there were omissions on that list. Did you get to the bottom of the truth on why the omissions were there?
Yes, Honourable Member, if you look at the first slide that we had, you would have seen that we have attached the response from the Director of Research in the Research Office. And according to what they have said is that the lists that came from Senate were then taken to, for enrollment. And when they got to AGU, they then realized
What's
that
AGU?
Oh, assessment and graduation unit. Sorry, that
Yeah.
would be in the registrars division.
yeah.
Then, when the list came from the Senate approval, they were then vetted or something happened, and then some of the names there in the he's actually admitting to that the names were then not appearing, and then you would see the second slide is showing one of the students where that student has not registered, which was. Before we came here, that was before Easter. They have not registered, and that is post, the decision that was made, resolution by Senate. Yes.
Okay, Registrar, do we have a reason for that deviation?
Thank you for the question, Honourable Member. I just think that maybe in responding, can I just maybe clarify if I'm understanding? So, the MND's registration has been a long standing matter that has been dealt with challenges of us as a registrar's office making sure that when we do register a student, the student has complied with all the related regulations, including submission of progress reports, and so on. So it is a collaborated effort between the RIE through the faculties, and then the last point then becomes the registrar's office where that compliance is tested. So I heard in the chairperson's submission that she does not understand why there was a vetting that was done when Senate had approved that we must register everybody. So I really would like to be given an opportunity just to contextualize and respond to that aspect, because she is not a member of Synex, which is an executive committee of Senate, but she is a member of Senate. So what happened is that because of the misunderstanding of the residency clause and challenges of the registration of the MND and having students that have overstayed literally in terms of the registration, we had embarked on a process of cleanup to make sure that when we register a student, all things have been covered that are supposed to be covered, so that when we are audited, we can justify those registration. So Synex, which is a body that does the preliminary work on behalf of Senate, had then made a recommendation to set aside a task team, where in that task team will look at the challenges of the registration of the MND student. That task team was then subsequently tasked with making sure that they elevate students that needs to be elevated. So they will look at what is the possible graduation outcome of a research student. So some of them, they felt that if the progress report indicates that the person is only doing data collection, for example, or only on chapter 1, and this person has been in the system for 7 years, chances are that person will not graduate within the required time. And so during that vetting process, the research office then provided us with a list. We then tabulated those lists and provided a response on each and every category of the student. With that said, Chairperson, then that list was served in Synex, and Synex made a recommendation to Senate to say students that have been vetted to be able to proceed, even though we will be waiving the policy and allowing them to continue with their studies, but there are students that have been determined that there is no prospect of graduation within the period allowed. So hence that submission then went to Senate through the RIE. Our role as the registrar is to vet. So the question that I wanted to ask is that vetting, where that vetting comes from, and I hope that that is clarified. So I have picked up, because from the registrar's point of view, what I said is that because Senate had already made a judgment to say, register all the students, irrespective, and give them a minimum of a year to finalize their registration. We then registered, there were about 170 or so students on the list. But when we picked up that on that list, there were other students that we still needed additional document in order to make sure that we close on the compliance aspect. And subsequent to that resolution of Senate, we have been getting information from the research office to say these students were not included in the list, and the two offices are coordinating to make sure that we close the loop on that.
Thank you. Does that make sense, Chairperson?
Chair, I think I need to make something clear. I understand the difference between Synex and Senate. And perhaps if we go back to the Act, I like what the registrar said. The Synex has no power. They must recommend to Senate, and Senate must approve. So I don't need to be a member of Synex to understand what would be the ultimate, resolutions on academic processes. As long as I'm part of Senate, where the decisions are taken. Secondly, Chair, we are talking about two different, scenarios. The scenario that I'm showing you there, it's a doctoral student. They're in their second year. They just arrived. Actually they are having their anniversary this month, meaning they are completing their first academic year. So that student would have been requested for them to submit a progress report or LS262A, which was the justification of why the students were not registered, because they said that some of those things were not submitted, Chairperson. Since January, those lists were made to say that here are the progress reports that you are so wanting. Here are the progress report, register the student. And that's why I'm saying that student was not registered until then. They were not on the list. What happened is that the list were confused. There are processes where the faculty, if you are having your first time, extension, it can be done at faculty level, it doesn't even have to escalate. If it's your second time and your third time, the processes that are there. And if you are a student registering for your second year, it's like any other, you don't have any exclusion. You just go and register. So why are you part of a list that will compel you to be, or compelled in a list of people that are there for 5 years or 10 years when you have just arrived?
Okay.
That is what I'm
Hold
talking
on.
about, Chair.
I hear you. So how many outstanding numbers of registrations do you have in the scenario? Is everybody registered, or is there still people lagging behind?
Chair, what would need to happen is that, as an institutional forum, even through our deputy chair, we can't say the numbers because they are coming one, when some of the supervisors or the students themselves are querying. But what we had was about 5 students from the Faculty of Humanities.
Registrar, is there a difficulty in comprehending the challenge?
Absolutely not.
So what are you going to do?
So what we have done with the Deputy Registrar's Office and Professor Mklo, is that since Senate has already given a precedent that we must register, we need to make sure that everybody is included in the list. On that proviso, we'll take it back to Senate to ratify. And so I would
update.
welcome, yes, and I would welcome, Chair, such submission to be sent to my office, because we cannot, if I don't know that there is matters of my office has not been told, they will not deal with it. But
So
I
are
am,
you saying,
yeah.
Registrar, that what the IF chairperson is talking about is not being brought to your office's attention by them?
The RIE office is dealing with it. And so I've taken a note of it, and we will check how many students are still out.
I'm asking a very clear question. I didn't mince my words. You were saying, Hori, the challenge you have is that if things are not brought to your office's attention, you can't deal with them. So I want to correct if there's a relationship gap problem. So are you saying that obviously there's a person that is dealing with them there? Are you saying you yourself have not been made aware, and like there's no
It was the first time I
direct-
see the email.
today?
Today, yes, that email. But I've taken note of it, and I will engage the chairperson also to look at it. But Mr. Mavungu's office must also be consulted as a deputy registrar. But our undertaking is to assist all those students as a premise that has been laid by Senate.
Okay, so you are saying they are interacting with which office?
The deputy registrar's office and research and innovation.
The Deputy Registrar's Office.
Yes.
So the Deputy Registrar's Office is not communicating with your office.
No, all what I'm saying, Chairperson, is that from the point when this started, which is the resolution of Senate was taken in March, between March and today, we have resolved most of the students, except the 40 that we're still waiting for documents on the Senate list. But what evolved last week, it's an evolving matter, this one, Chair, is that we found that there were students that were not in that list. So the coordination should go with the RIE to say, give us the complete list so that we can finalize this process. We get information from RIE via the faculties to be able to capture those students in the system. But we are consolidating that, and Professor Slalinto will just have to check with the team and make sure that we close the loop on this one. But like I said, I've got emails stating last week where the supervisor indicated that I did not submit my progress report, and I said, let's move with those students because there's already a precedent. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, so I want to understand, pause 2 minutes. Yeah. We are an institution of higher learning. We should be proud or towards being obsessed about having automated systems, general. From what I'm gathering from yourself is that you have created a system now to validate whatever through a manual process. And this manual process it's like NSFAS saying they are dealing with appeals on XL of 1.2 million students. Doesn't make sense. So you have have put together a process to validate this process or these things through a manual process. Why that is the case? Why is that the case? It was when they presented, they said, you introduced this reviewing. I don't know, I can't remember the exact words. You introduced the reviewing, and which they believe that will not work. And the point in case is that PhD student who is now affected by the system when they are not ordinarily supposed to be affected. Just take us through that part properly, because for me, it has gaps now.
Okay. Chair, in my submission, I did indicate that there has been challenges with the registration process. It's a system issue. We don't necessarily have an automated process to get progress reports online and so on. So it relies heavily on human beings, which means the burden of vetting requires AGU to also look at whether the progress report has been submitted and has been loaded onto the system. Hence, put aside a task team that will look at the gaps in terms of the process, make sure that at least there's optimization of systems in that. But there's also an issue that was raised by the task team of the policy itself. So there's two parallel processes that needs to be looked at. One, a system issue, improving system deficiencies, but also looking at the policies on whether it is clear to everybody and everybody understands, or the institution needs to probably review their policy and make it more enabling. And also support for research students, because we need to also get to the bottom of how is the student on the system for 10 years? Where are the gaps? Are they not getting support? And so there is a collaborated effort to look at those challenges holistically, Chair, and address the very same issue that we are dealing with now. You would also notice that and I think this is also coming from the independent assessment as well. The use of the system that we're using at ITS, there seems to be system challenges as well, which we are also looking at fixing and making sure that we improve our business, Chairperson. But for the purposes of the MNDs, the task team, which is including faculty members, staff in the registrar's office, staff in the research and innovation office, will look at the best possible processes in as far as the MND's registration are concerned. So there's a lot of work to be done. We do concede that the process is not clean, and that is why we work with the information that we have been given and trust that we can activate those students on the system, Chair.
But the IF chair is making it very clear that they're not referring to dinosaurs in the system. They're referring to people who've just arrived. So why is there an issue with registering or the continuation of people who've just arrived? Because I don't understand. That's what you're not answering, and that's what the plea coming from Institutional Forum is to say, why is there a bottleneck to that process? That's number one. Number two, your deputy registrar has delegated power to resolve issues that don't need you to deal with. So why can't, where's the deputy registrar? Hi, Yone. Why do they need to get your approval before things can go? Why can't they just authorize on their own?
Okay, let me start with the first one first.
Let's look at 13 minutes and I have 10 more questions to ask. So don't give me context, just be brief
No,
to the
I'm
point.
not. I'm not honorable member. What I wanted to say is that, yes, they do have delegated authority. In fact, I do have an email where I said, move with the MNDs and they can proceed to that. And then the bottleneck is because there is progress report that we require from the supervisor who works with the student. The IF chair said the closing date for that, it's not aligned to the deadline. But we work on a year plan which is consulted with all the stakeholders.
I'm going to pause you. So you're absorbing yourself to say you as the registrar, you have given the deputy registrar all the power to resolve all the issues as far as registrations and admissions of the people that IF is complaining about, and that the deputy registrar's failure were now Zibinix.
No, I'm participating, Honorable Member.
You can't participate when you said things were not brought to your attention, and then in the same breath say things were delegated to the power of the deputy registrar, who was supposed to have resolved them. So how we in Tira?
No, I am in it, Chair and Honorable Member. We are resolving these issues. I am even indicating that I even have a report on the MNDs. We even shared a report to NEHAW on the progress of the MNDs. I reported also to Labor Relations Forum where they asked about the progress on the MNDs, and I personally went and gave them an update on the challenges and what we are trying to do to resolve it. So at no point am I absolving myself. All what I said is that I want to look at the details of that email and also follow up with RIE so that we deal with the context that I am aware of. Thank you, Chair.
I'm gonna move, Chair, because we're not gonna move on this.